Echoes on the boardwalk. I've always found something hauntingly beautiful about coastal towns during off-season. The transformation of Ocean View, Massachusetts, from bustling tourist hotspot to ghost town was precisely what attracted me to it. After moving there for work, I discovered the abandoned boardwalk, once the vibrant heart of summer activity, now a hollow skeleton stretching alongside the Atlantic. The emptiness became my sanctuary. Every night around 10 p.m., I'd lace up my running shoes and hit that weathered wooden path. The rhythmic sound of my footfalls against the planks, accompanied by the distant crash of waves, created the perfect soundtrack to clear my mind. No people, no distractions, just me, the ocean breeze, and miles of deserted boardwalk. Last Thursday night started like any other. The air had that distinctive chill that carried the scent of salt and rotting wood. Dim street lamps buzzed intermittently, casting elongated shadows that danced as I passed. I was about a mile into my route when that unmistakable feeling crept up my spine, the sensation of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder and my blood ran cold. Against the backdrop of darkness stood a figure, motionless, facing directly toward me from at least 100 yards back, just standing there, perfectly still. Probably another local, I told myself, turning forward and increasing my pace slightly. But the uneasiness lingered, building until I couldn't resist looking back again. He was closer now, much closer, yet I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't sensed movement. Still completely motionless, just facing me. My stomach knotted with dread. I yanked out my earbud and picked up my pace, the soothing rhythm of my run now replaced by panic strides. Every few seconds, I heard what sounded like footsteps behind me, perfectly synchronized with my own, stopping the instant I paused. Each time I dared to look back, he had somehow advanced, closer and closer, yet always caught in that same unmoving stance. How was he getting closer without actually moving? The boardwalk that once felt like an escape now seemed like an endless trap. My parked Jeep at the south entrance fell miles away. I broke into a desperate sprint, lungs burning, legs screaming in protest. With each frantic glance over my shoulder, he was gaining ground, yet I never once caught him in motion. I abandoned any pretense of composure and ran blindly toward the exit, barely registering the splinters from the weathered boards piercing my palms when I stumbled. When the exit finally appeared in the distance, I could have wept with relief. My hands trembled violently as I fumbled with my key fob, nearly dropping it before managing to unlock the vehicle. I hurled myself inside, slammed the door, and jammed the key into the ignition. As I threw the Jeep into reverse and backed out of my spot, my headlights swept across the empty parking lot. I shifted into drive and cranked the wheel, then froze. He was standing directly in front of my car, exactly where I'd been parked moments before. In the brief second my headlights illuminated him, I caught a glimpse of a dark hoodie pulled low, obscuring most of his face. But what little I could see beneath that hood, it wasn't right. Something about the proportions, the pallor. I swerved around him, tires screeching against the pavement as I fled. The entire drive home through the empty streets of Ocean View, I blew through stop signs and red lights, my only thought being escape. Each time I checked my rearview mirror, I expected to see him somehow there, still watching, still following. At home, I locked every door, every window, every possible entry point. Sleep was impossible. The few times exhaustion claimed me, nightmares jolted me awake. Visions of that figure, sometimes pursuing, sometimes just watching, my mind filling in grotesque details for the face I never clearly saw. I put my house in Ocean View up for sale. I don't run anymore, not at night, not alone, and especially not on that boardwalk, where I can't shake the feeling that something is still waiting, perfectly still, watching for my return. Trapped in Montauk. This happened last summer when I was 22. My friends and I had rented the cheapest Airbnb we could find in Montauk, Long Island for a weekend getaway. It was our final night, and we'd spend hours on the beach with a bonfire, just drinking beers and sharing stories under the stars. Nothing wild, Just good company and the hypnotic sound of waves crashing against the shore. By 2 a.m., everyone was ready to call a night, but I was still wide awake. The combination of ocean air and a slight buzz had me feeling restless, so I decided to walk it off before heading back to our rental. "I'll catch up with you guys later," I told my friends as they trudged back across the sand. There's something eerily beautiful about a seaside boardwalk after midnight. The carnival-like atmosphere of daytime disappears, leaving behind this skeletal wooden path stretching into darkness. The usually packed food stands and souvenir shops stood abandoned, their metal shutters creating strange shadows under the sparse lighting. Having grown up in Arizona, coastal towns were still a novelty to me. After wandering for about 20 minutes, my bladder reminded me of all the beer I consumed. I'm not the type to just relieve myself in public, something my friends constantly mock me for. So I was relieved when I spotted a public restroom at the far end of the boardwalk. It was one of those concrete block structures that look like they've survived multiple hurricanes, with a single flickering light above the entrance. I hesitated at the door. Even from outside, I could smell the harsh chemical cleaners mixing with something else. But nature was calling too urgently to be picky. I pushed open the heavy door, which creaked like it hadn't been oiled since the Clinton administration. The interior was worse than I'd imagined. Grimy tiles, buzzing fluorescent lights that illuminated only half the space, and that overwhelming smell of industrial bleach attempting to mask years of neglect. I headed for the farthest stall, wanting to put as much distance between myself and the entrance as possible. Just as I closed the stall door, I heard the main door creak open again. My heart sank. So much for privacy at 2 a.m. The footsteps that followed were odd. They moved slowly, deliberately, circling around the bathroom in patterns that made no sense. Sometimes they seemed to come from multiple directions at once, as if there were several people walking in perfect synchronization. But I never heard voices, not a word, not a cough, not even the sound of breathing. Eventually, the footsteps stopped somewhere near the sinks. Just stopped. No water running, no paper towel dispenser, nothing. Just complete stillness. I finished quickly, eager to leave, but when I tried to push the stall door open, it wouldn't budge. I jiggled the latch, thinking it had caught on something, but the door remained firmly stuck. My irritation quickly morphed into something darker as I realized the footsteps had started again. Closer this time, right outside my stall. A cold wave of dread washed over me. Someone was holding my door shut. I rammed my shoulder against it, but it didn't give. The adrenaline surging through my veins sharpened my senses, and some primal part of my brain started screaming that I was in danger. I backed up as far as the tiny stall would allow and charged the door with everything I had. The door flew open with a crash, and I stumbled out, nearly losing my balance. Through my peripheral vision, I caught the main bathroom door swinging shut as if someone had just exited. I scanned the bathroom. Empty. Whoever had been in there with me was gone, or so I thought. I rushed to the sink, hastily washing my hands while planning my escape. When I grabbed the main door handle and pulled, my stomach dropped. It wouldn't move, not even a millimeter. The handle itself wouldn't turn, as if it had been locked or jammed from the outside. I was trapped. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing off the tiled walls. "Is anyone there?" The door's stuck. No response. I pounded on the door, hoping anyone, might be passing by on a boardwalk. "Hey, can someone help me? I'm locked in." That's when I heard it, a subtle, shifting sound coming from one of the stalls behind me. I whipped around, scanning under the stall doors. No feet visible, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that I wasn't alone. Someone was standing on a toilet, hiding, which meant there had been at least 2 people in here all along. One who'd left, and one who'd stay behind. My phone showed no service bars, of course. The grimy window near the ceiling suddenly became my only option. It was small, maybe 18 inches square, and covered in decades of salt spray and grime. I climbed onto the sink, praying the ancient porcelain wouldn't break under my weight, and pushed to the window. Years of pain had sealed it shut, but desperation gave me strength. As I was forcing my shoulders through the narrow opening, a stall door slammed open behind me. I made the mistake of looking back. Standing there was a man I'll never forget. Ghostly pale skin stretched over a gaunt face, with deep-set eyes that reflected no light. His straggly beard and hair were peppered with gray, but he wore clothes that might have belonged to a teenager. A faded hoodie with some Surf brand logo and baggy cargo shorts. Despite the youthful attire, he had to be in his 50s. But what still haunts me wasn't his appearance. It was his expression. Complete absence. Not anger, not malice, just void. As if I was looking at someone who had forgotten what it meant to be human. And then he smiled. His teeth were filed to points. I don't remember getting through that window. Pure survival instinct took over. I fell hard onto the boardwalk below, my knee cracking against the wood with enough force to bring tears to my eyes. But pain was a luxury I couldn't afford. I ran, limping, until the restroom was out of sight. When I finally found a late-night convenience store with people inside, I called the police. The officers who responded seemed to take it seriously enough. Montauk might be a tourist destination, but it has its share of incidents, especially during summer months. By the time we returned to the restroom, it was empty. One officer inspected the door handle and pointed out fresh scratch marks around the lock. Someone definitely tampered with this, he said, examining it with his flashlight. Looks like they jammed something in the mechanism. They took my statement and promised to patrol the area more frequently, but without security cameras or witnesses, there wasn't much to go on. Smart move with the window, the younger officer told me as we walked back to their cruiser. Some people aren't so lucky. I never found out if they caught anyone. We left Montauk the next morning as planned, and I was too shaken to follow up. Sometimes I wonder if they even looked. The physical evidence was clear enough. The jammed door handle, my bruised knee, but I've never told anyone about the man's filed teeth. Some details are too disturbing to share, too outlandish to be believed. I still go to beaches. I still enjoy the ocean, but I will never use a public bathroom on a deserted boardwalk again. And whenever I hear footsteps behind me that sound just a little too deliberate, too measured, my mind goes back to that night in Montauk when I nearly became someone's prey. The Lighthouse at Widow's Point. I never should have taken that job at Widow's Point Lighthouse in northern Maine. The pay was too good to pass up, almost suspiciously good for what was essentially just a 3-month caretaker position during the winter off-season. The historical society that owned the lighthouse needed someone to maintain the place while they secured funding for renovations. Just keep an eye on things, Mr. Reynolds from the Historical Society told me during the interview. Make sure no teenagers break in, no pipes freeze, nothing like that. The lighthouse itself has been decommissioned for decades, so you don't need to worry about the light or anything technical. When I asked why the previous caretaker had left so suddenly, Reynolds maintained eye contact a beat too long before mumbling something about a family emergency. I should have recognized that hesitation for what it was, a warning. The lighthouse stood on a narrow, rocky peninsula about 2 miles from the nearest town of Blackwater Cove. My first day there, I was struck by its isolation, a solitary white tower rising against steel gray skies, with nothing but the Atlantic Ocean stretching to the horizon. The adjoining keeper's cottage was small but comfortable enough, recently updated with modern heating and plumbing. The Historical Society had preserved much of the original furniture and decoration from the 1890s when the lighthouse was first built. Old photographs lined the hallway, showing various lighthouse keepers and their families throughout the decades. I noticed something odd about these photos almost immediately. In every single one, the faces seemed unnaturally somber, not a single smile among them. The first week passed uneventfully. I spent my days reading, taking walks along the rocky shore when weather permitted, and doing minor repairs around the property. At night, I'd fall asleep to the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. It was lonely but peaceful, until the 8th night, when I was jolted awake by what sounded like footsteps on the spiral staircase that led up to the light room. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moving slowly upward. I lay frozen in bed, trying to rationalize what I was hearing. The wind, perhaps. Old buildings settle and make strange noises after all. But these were unmistakably footsteps. the distinctive sound of boots on metal stairs. After gathering my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The staircase access door was wide open, though I distinctly remembered closing and locking it before going to bed. A cold breeze flowed down from above. "Hello." I called up the stairwell, my voice echoing in the confined space. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. Then, after an excruciating silence, they resumed, but now they were coming down. I backed away, heart pounding. The door to my bedroom suddenly seemed miles away. My flashlight beam trembled as I pointed it up the spiral staircase, but I couldn't see anyone. Yet the footsteps continued, getting closer with each metallic clang. I finally broke from my paralysis and ran back to my room, slamming the door shut and pushing a dresser against it. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs and then stopped again. I waited, hardly daring to breathe, for what felt like hours. Eventually, exhaustion overcame fear, and I fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a particularly vivid nightmare. The staircase door was closed and locked, just as I remembered leaving it. No signs of intrusion, no footprints, nothing disturbed. I even checked the visitor logbook that documented everyone who had climbed to the top since the Lighthouse was open for historical tours in the summer months. The last entry was from 3 months ago, but the following night it happened again. This time, I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the staircase door unlatch by itself. Then came the footsteps, starting at the bottom and slowly ascending. I watched, frozen in place, as the door swung open on its own, revealing the dimly lit stairwell beyond. I called the Historical Society the next morning, trying to keep my voice steady as I asked if there had been any reported incidents at the Lighthouse in the past. "What kind of incidents?" Reynolds asked cautiously. "I don't know. Strange noises, doors opening by themselves." There was a long pause before he said, "The Lighthouse has a history, Ms. Winters. Most old buildings do. But nothing dangerous has ever happened there." I wanted to believe him. But that afternoon, while sorting through some old maintenance records I found in a desk drawer, I discovered newspaper clippings from 1908. The headline read, "Lighthouse Keeper Leaps to Death." According to the article, a keeper named Samuel Crawford had jumped from the top of the lighthouse after claiming for weeks that someone was following him up and down the stairs at night. That evening, I decided to test a theory. I scattered a thin layer of flour on the metal stairs and at the bottom landing, then locked the door and went to bed. At exactly 2:17 a.m., I know because I checked my phone, the familiar sound of footsteps began again. This time, I stayed in bed, listening as they made their way up to the top of the lighthouse, paused for several minutes, then started back down. When they reached the bottom, instead of stopping, they continued down the hallway toward my bedroom door. I held my breath as a shadow appeared in the gap beneath my door. The temperature in the room plummeted so rapidly I could see my breath forming clouds in the air. The doorknob turned slowly, but the dresser prevented it from opening. A soft, rasping voice whispered through the crack, "Join me at the top. The view is spectacular." I didn't sleep for the remainder of the night. When dawn finally broke, I cautiously moved the dresser and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was empty. I approached the staircase door, which was once again closed and locked. With shaking hands, I unlocked it and looked down at the flour I had spread the night before. The powder was undisturbed, not a single footprint visible, except for a single, clear set of wet prints that started at the bottom step and led upward. Prints that looked like they had been made by bare feet emerging from water. I packed my car within 20 minutes and drove away from Widow's Point Lighthouse, calling Reynolds from the road to tell him I wouldn't be coming back. He didn't sound surprised. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the Blackwater Cove Police Department. The detective wanted to know when I had last been at the lighthouse. Apparently, a group of teenagers had broken in and one of them had fallen or jumped from the top. Before the accident, the boy had texted his friend claiming someone was following them up the stairs. According to the detective, the boy's last message read, "He says the view is spectacular. I never told the police what I had experienced. How could I explain something I barely understood myself? But I did research the lighthouse's history more thoroughly afterward. Turns out Samuel Crawford wasn't the only keeper to die there. 5 others had met similar fates over the decades, all reported as accidents or suicides. And each time, a new keeper would be hired, someone desperate or unsuspecting, lured by the promise of good pay for an easy job in solitude. Just like me. The position at Widow's Point Lighthouse is probably listed again by now. The pay will be excellent, the duties minimal. But if you apply, and if you get the job, do yourself a favor. Never climb those stairs after dark. And if you hear footsteps in the night, don't look to see who's there. He just wants company for his spectacular view. Hey friends, thanks for venturing beneath the boardwalk with us on tonight's Dark Tales Vault. If those mysterious figures lurking in the darkness left you checking under your bed, consider hitting that subscribe button. Right now, only about 30% of our viewers are subscribed, and we'd love to have you join our community of fear enthusiasts. Has this story changed how you think about those beach boardwalks you walked on? Have you ever lost something valuable only to wish you'd never gone looking for it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every like and share helps bring these terrifying tales to others who appreciate that thin line between everyday life and lurking horror. It takes just a second to subscribe, but makes all the difference in helping our channel grow. And remember, next time you drop something through the cracks, sometimes it's better to just let it go. Until next time, sleep tight and stay out of the shadows.